Hey there. There are 700 muscles in our body. But can we imagine our life without muscles? Are they just associated with movement? Well, exactly. So let us try to understand first of all what are muscles. So muscles, they stand for a tissue, as well as this muscle tissue gets grouped with a lot of other components, like there might be nerves, there might be blood vessels, and hence we can say that when we talk about a muscle, very much we are talking about an organ. Now, this organ is involved with a lot of different functions. And yes, out of the top of the mind, the first one that you might be thinking is movement. Yes, we can move our lips and mouth, and that is how you're, toning all the sounds that's coming from your larynx, and that is how you make sense. That is how you're moving. That is how you go and open the door to get yourself a pizza, right? Now, what happens with that? Besides that, so you eat that pizza, and down it's in your stomach. It stays for some time. So we know via the help of sphincter muscles, even internal movement is controlled. So not only external, but a lot of internal movement is controlled via muscles. Muscles, because they have a lot of blood vessels, they can also store a lot of blood, as well as, who can forget the act of shivering, right? So when muscles move, they produce heat, so they're also acting as heat producers of the body. Further, they also stabilize our postures, that is how we are able to sit, and they stabilize our joints, right? And very importantly, it is also important in protection, right? So they protect as well, right? So we can see they have a lot of features. Now let's talk a little bit more about them. Now we know that muscles are attached to the bones via tendons. So these little green structures that you see, those are tendons. Now, the outermost layer of the muscle is an organ. We call it epimysium. Inside this epimysium, what you see is you see small bundles of muscle fibers, and these bundles are called fascicles. Now, fascicles are further covered by perimysium, which is represented by the white lines in between those fascicles. Now, these fascicles, as I just said, are a bunch of muscle cells. So these red dots represent the muscle cells, which is covered by the endomysium. Now, one muscle cell has a lot of filaments, and the two important ones are actin and myosin. Actin being called the thin filament, myosin being called the thick filament. Now let us examine a single muscle cell. Now this is a single muscle cell, and you can see these blue lines and yellow lines here. Now the yellow lines are thick filaments and the blue lines are thin filaments, right? Now these are both made up of proteins called myosin and actin. So that's the thin filament that's made of actin. Actin is a globular protein which joins end to end to form the filamentous actin. Now the thick filament is made up of protein called myosin, which has a head and a tail. Now the dark zone is where the thick and the thin filaments overlap, as you can see, and I zone, the light zone, is the one where the overlap does not exist, and the tintin protein holds on them in the Z line. Now, how do they actually move the parts of your body, right? So right now we just talked about the myosin head, right? Let me term this as the myosin head. Just above that, we have the actin filament, right? Now we can see that on this actin filaments, we have these little holes where the myosin can bind. So this is a myosin binding site, but this myosin binding site is covered by the overlying tropomyosin. Now, tropomyosin does indeed prevent the binding of myosin to the actin, but then you have these small proteins called troponin. Troponin has sites for binding of calcium. Once the calcium is released upon arrival of the action potential from the nerve, that means when your brain sends a message for the muscle to contract, this there is a subsequent release of calcium ions by the SER. If you remember, sarcoplasmic reticulum, or simply the smooth endoplasmic reticulum of the muscle cells. Now, these SER releases this calcium. The calcium binds to the troponin, and troponin causes tropomyosin to move away. Now, because of this moving away, the site is available, the myosin binding site is available for binding, and that is how the myosin head binds and pulls, right? It binds and pulls the filaments towards the direction, and that is how the A band, the dark band, pulls closer, and hence the muscle contracts. So you can see it's pretty simple. Just to revise, so today's session started with us talking about the muscles, what are they made up of, and what are the layers which we talked about: epi, peri, and endomysium. Further, we looked inside a muscle fiber and we looked at the arrangement of the filaments, and we also understood how does the action potential changes the binding of calcium ions, which can cause the A band, that is the dark band, to contract and muscle as a whole contracts. I hope this makes sense.
We hope this video was helpful. To see more biology topics covered, click on our channel and don't forget to subscribe.